Night. So, equilibrium and ceteris paribus assumption. So, we will be explaining market equilibrium and ang iyahang o ang mga concept sa ceteris paribus assumption. Okay, so last meeting or sa last week nato ng mga discussion, we already tackled the equilibrium, pero dili pa jud nato siya na kuanon na explain o deeper kung sa tong equilibrium. So, as you can see sa to ang kuan, sa to ang module for week 4, equilibrium is used in partial economic analysis or the PEA, and the general economics or general economic analysis or the GEA, the GEA. So the above example states that there is an equal demand and supply. As you can see, there is some example picture na gihatag nako, which means that ang demand can be satisfied by the supply, then ang equilibrium can also predict surplus and shortage. So, diri sa to ang example, makita na to ang equilibrium sa middle kung asa nag-meet si supply o si demand. So, to further understand what is equilibrium, I will be playing a video for you.
Equilibrium is a state of balanced supply and demand. On a graph, equilibrium occurs when the price and demand curves intersect. At this point, consumers are getting the amount of goods they want, suppliers are selling their goods, and prices become stable. To find the equilibrium price for hammers sold at the hardware store, chart the price on a vertical axis and the quantity produced on the horizontal axis. The demand curve slopes down because the hammer's price decreases as more customers demand them, while the supply curve slopes up because producers will supply more hammers at a higher price to increase revenues. The equilibrium price is found where these curves intersect. Reaching equilibrium can only be done in theory because the prices of goods and services change with fluctuations in demand and supply. For example, too much supply generally causes prices to decrease, which leads to greater demand. Supply and demand are relatively equal, and the market is generally in equilibrium when major indexes experience a period of consolidation or sideways momentum.
Which ang market supply o ang demand balance each other. And as a result, ang prices na to mahimo siya as stable. So generally, an oversupply of goods or services causes price to go down, which result siya in higher demand, while if we say magkaroon tog undersupply or shortage, it causes prices to go up, resulting in less demand. So the balancing effect of supply ug sa demand results in a state of equilibrium. If balance ang supply and demand, muna siya ato ang tawag nga equilibrium. So, another example of this, for example, isa ka store manufacturer, mag-produce siya og 1,000 nga 1,000 nga toys, and ang iyahang retail price for them kay 10 pesos per piece. But no one is willing to buy them at that price. Bisan 10 pesos na siya, wala dyan po willing mo palit sa sa dulaan. To pump up the demand, ang store kay ang iyahang strategy na buhaton kay i-reduce niya ang price to 8 pesos. So there are in that point magkaroon na og 250 buyers at the price point nga 8 pesos. So in response, the store further slashes the retail cost to 5 pesos. Mas gipamubuan pa niya. And with that with that response nila sa market na nagkaroon sila og 250 buyers nga buyers at toys for 8 pesos, ang ilahang another response for that kay mas gipa-lower pa jud nila ang ilang retail cost for 5 pesos. With that, kay nagkaroon sila og 500 buyers in total. So, upon further reduction of the prices to 2 pesos, pag-reduce pa jud nila og presyo to 2 pesos, 1,000 buyers of the toys, mas nag-usbong pa jud ang demand because of the lower or the reduction of prices. So at this price point, ang supply kay mo equal na siya kay demand. But 2 pesos is the ang magiging equilibrium price na for the toys. So that is the example of the equilibrium. Then surplus and shortage. So I will be reading the the definition of surplus and shortage sa namugikan sa tuang module. So if we say surplus, a surplus is used to describe many excess assets including income, profits, capital, and even goods or mga products. Okay? Excess na mga assets or inventory, kumbaga sa inyong mga produkto na available sa inyo So, if we say a market surplus or surplus, it occurs when there is excess supply. So, that is quantity supplied is greater than quantity demand or the quantity demanded. So, diri ang situation, some producer will not be able to sell all their goods. So, this will impact them to lower their price to make their product more appealing sa market. So, in order to stay competitive, kadaghanan sa mga businesses will lower their prices. So, with lowering the market price, so mas makaintay sila og more customer para mapalit or mo-avail sila ng product. So, in response to the lower price, ang mga consumers will increase their quantity demanded, moving the market toward an equilibrium price and also sa quantity na aspect. So, in this situation, ang excess supply class has exerted downward pressure on the price of the product. While there is a shortage, this is a situation in which demand for a good or service exceeds the available supply. As you can see, there is ito ang example picture, no, ang shortage kay na sa baba sa equilibrium. So, mas nilower pa siya dito kung asa dapat equal si supply and demand. So, possible causes of a shortage include miscalculation of demand by a company producing a good or service. So, diri na magawa si forecasting. Then, resulting in the inability to keep up with demand or government policies such as price fixing or rationing. So, diri as a market shortage or the shortage, it will occur when there is excess demand. That is, quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. So, mas taas ang demand sa market versus sa gina-release ng mga supplies. So, in this situation, consumers will not be able to buy as much of a good as they would like. So, in response to the demand of the consumers, producers will raise both the price of their product and the quantity they are willing to supply. So, the increase in price will be too much for some consumers and they will no longer demand for the product. Meanwhile, the increased quantity of available product will satisfy other consumers. Eventually, because of that strategy, ma-meet nila ang equilibrium. Then, let us proceed na sa Ceteris paribus. So, in economics, the assumption Okay, Ceteris paribus actually class literally means holding other things constant. So this is a Latin phrase that is commonly translated into English as all else being equal. So this is a dominant assumption in mainstream economic thinking. So it acts as a shorthand indication of the effect of one economic variable on another provided all the variables remain the same. So, as we can, um, remember sa to ang past discussions, may nag-ask man gusto ko ang student, unsa-unsa datong mga economic variables. So, di ba, na, ang first economic variable nato kay price of good or services, incomes of consumers, price of related goods and services, expected future price of product, number of consumers in market, taste patterns of consumers. So mao na siya tong mga different nga economic variables. Later on kay i-discuss nato na siya kay mao na siya ang isa ka or mao to sila tanan ang included sa pag-solve nato sa quantity demand sa ato ang week 5. So, it helps isolate multiple independent variables affecting a dependent variable. Casual relationship among economic variables are difficult to isolate in the real world since most economic na mga variables nato are usually affected by more than one cause or reasons, but models often depend on assumptions of independent variables. Class, kaning ceteris paribus man good, in real world nga situation. For instance, it would be nearly impossible na ma-determine na to ang causal relationship between the price of good. So if we say price of good, this is our dependent variable, and also the number of units demanded. Kaning number of units demanded nato diri will be the independent variable. So while also taking into the account the other variables that could affect the price. So for example, the price of the price of baka, the price of beef may rise if more people are willing to purchase the beef, and producers may sell it for a lower price if fewer people want it. But prices of beef may also drop if, for instance, pwede mag-drop ang price sa baka if first, the price of land to raise cattle also drop. Katong kung asa ninyo ginapa-stay ang inyong alaga nga baka. Second instance kay making it ang ilahang food consumption if nag-drop ba or nagtaas, so mo depende japon dito So term lisod, okay, lisod i-assume or it will be difficult to assume it if it was kanang ang imuhang basis lang sa imuhang pagbutang sa presyo sa imuhang baka kay mag-focus lang ka on the demand aspect. Okay, kato di ay. Lisod mag-assume og imuhang prices or sa imuhang price if ang imuhang focus lang kay katong didto lang sa demand sa imuhang consumer. Dili na ka mag-think sa imuhang expenses nga aspect, like for example nagarenta lang ka sa sa yuta na kung asa nimo gi-raise ang imuhang mga baka, or dili pud ka mag-base sa imuhang ginapakaon sa imuhang baka, base imuhang ginapakaon sa imuhang baka kay mga feeds and any aspect na ma-encounter nimo sa environment na maka-affect sa mga business na pagbaligya og baka. Kung dili nimo na siya i-assume, 'di ba? Lisod kaayo nga lisod kaayo mag-assume og presyo kay most probably manggod if na ay mga circumstances na ma-encounter kay naadjud price changes na mahitabo. Another example is ang kanang sa baboy karon, 'di ba? Sa swine flu, tungod sa swine flu kay mahal na kayo ang karne sa baboy kay gamay na lang kayo ang as per to the sellers kay gamay na lang daw ang supply sa kuan sa baboy, 'di ba? Because of the swine flu. Mo na nagamahal ang karne sa baboy. Dati kay makapalit lang may og kuan. Paborito man gud mo ang sa part sa tail, sa pig. Dati kay naa lang siya sa 150 karon kay padulungay na ata to 300 tong sa kuan, murag nag times 2 ang presyo sa karning baboy. Basta nagmahal siya kaayo, like literal. Because of the swine flu daw and gamay na lang daw kaayo ang supply and also dagan pa jud kayo aspect ang ilahang ginabasis kay like kailangan pa jud ipa-check ang ilahang alagang baboy before nila slaughter nga na and also dapat i-check po daw sa government kung healthy ba wala ba swine flu tong ilahang mga alaga. Then katong mga naapektuhan og kuan og swine flu kay literal jud baya nga diretso jud baya patso ng ilahang mga alaga. So kana na mga instances ang atoan dapat i-assume. So daghan kaayo i-assume dili lang isa ka variable. Hindi
Hello.
any variables. So however, if these other variables such as price of related goods, production cost and even sa labor cost if ever nga na labor cost are held constant under the ceteris paribus assumption, it is simpler na to describe the relationship between only price og sa demand. Mao lang to ang iyahang kuan diri excuse sa ceteris paribus if ever nga ang price sa related goods nga in connection for example dito sa pag-alaga ninyo og baboy, then sa production cost po ninyo, sa labor cost po ninyo, if constant lang jud siya nga assumption, then mas dali na kaayo ang pag-describe ninyo sa relationship between sa pagpresyo ninyo sa inyong produkto and also pagbangga ninyo sa demand sa consumers. Next kay sa ano application of or nganong kailangan nato gamiton ang ceteris paribus. Before that, I want to play a video regarding the ceteris paribus.
Ceteris paribus is Latin for all things being equal. When used in economics or finance, the implication of the term is the same: the effect of one economic variable on another if all other variables remain the same. For example, you could say that the increase in the price of chicken would result, ceteris paribus, in less chicken being sold to customers. Of course, that's assuming the price for pork, beef, and lamb haven't increased at the same time and that those prices won't affect demand for those products as well. Let's say that Liz goes to the store to buy some ingredients for Southern fried chicken, and when she gets there, the price per pound is much higher than it was the previous week and out of her price range. However, the price of catfish is the same as it was last week. Liz went to the store planning to buy chicken, but she's also fine with having catfish for dinner, so she buys that instead. On the other hand, if Liz gets to the store and the prices of catfish, pork, beef, and lamb have increased as well, Liz will still probably buy chicken for her recipe that evening.
Okay, so that is an example of the ceteris paribus. So why do we need to use the ceteris paribus? So it helps us on the analyzing and evaluating economics with the entire factors that is close to impossible. So without using ceteris paribus, all the factors or variables would be tangled up with other factors and also sa ibang mga variables. So example, the common factor affecting the quantity demanded are first, as what I have said earlier, price of goods service or sa magiging solving nato na mahitabo next meeting, the symbol for price of good or service, P, income or incomes of consumers kay M, prices of related goods and services kay PR, the number of consumers in expected future price of product kay PE, number of consumers in market kay N, taste pattern of consumers kay A. So general demand equation would be quantity demand equals to F, i-multiply na to sa price of good or service, incomes of consumers, prices of related goods and services, expected future price of product, number of consumers in market, then taste patterns of the consumer. So, if mo if kailangan na to mo gamit og ceteris paribus na assumption para ma-determine na to ang relationship ni quantity demand og ni price, ang ato ang gamiton lang kay quantity demand equals to F multiplied to the price of goods or services. Kaya para makuha na to ang relationship ni quantity demand and also sa presyo. So, the application of ceteris paribus class, suppose that you wanted to explain the price of milk. So, with a little thought, it becomes apparent that milk costs are influenced by numerous things. For example, the availability of cows, ang health sa inyong baka, the cost of feeding the cows, the amount of useful land, the cost of possible milk substitute, the number of milk suppliers, the level of inflation sa atuang economy, consumer preferences, transportation, and daghan pang klase nga variables nga related diri sa pagpresyo na to sa tuang gatas. So, as an economist, instead applying ceteris paribus, which essentially says if all other factors remain constant, a reduction in the supply of milk producing cows, for example, causes the price of milk to rise. So, mao na siya ang ginabuhat sa ceteris paribus. If ever nga tanan factors no kay if ever nga i-apply nato si ceteris paribus kay tanan factors nga dapat hunaon sa isa ka economist kay magiging constant tanan mo remain siya as constant. So with that, pwede ta mo assume na pwede ta mag-reduce og supply sa sa milk producing cow. So pwede na to siya ibutang na reason or the logic here is that because of the reduction of the the milk producing cows nagkaroon og increase sa presyo sa mga gatas. As another example, take the laws of supply and demand. So economists say that the law of demand demonstrate that ceteris paribus, more goods tend to be purchased at lower price, or that if ang demand for any given product exceeds the product supplies. So that is the ceteris paribus. So with that scenario, prices will likely rise. So ceteris paribus class is an extension of scientific modeling. So the scientific method is built on identifying, isolating, and even testing the impact of an independent variable sa atoang mga dependent variable. So that is all our discussion for today. So do you have questions and clarifications before we will end our discussion?